So welcome to the FAIRCORE4EOSC Kick-Off. It's really nice to see all of you here. We started discussing this proposal in March last year for the first time, or the call that then eventually turned into the proposal that turned into the project. Now, it's been a long way to get here, and we're just at the beginning. But I'm really happy to see all of you here. I can't perhaps welcome you to my hometown in the same way that Ingrid has done, and being native from here and using her academic background to give us metaphors of sailing off to the wonderful horizon to do our work. But as many of you know, we had in the previous 2 days the kickoff of the FAIR Impact. And today we have the 2 days, and tomorrow the 2 days of the FAIRCORE4EOSC Kick-Off. And my own background is in sustainability science. And this suits me very well that we managed to organize these kickoffs back to back, because what I have been doing professionally earlier is evaluating the trade-offs between different ways of doing things and looking at what are the sustainability benefits of doing things better. And in this combining our kickoffs, there's definitely sustainability benefits, because we don't need to fly to 2 different places. We can utilize less human resources to organize when we are at the same location. So the environment benefits and the economy benefits, and in sustainability impact assessment that I have been working with, this is what we do. We have to have a trade-offs between the economic benefits, the ecological benefits, and the social benefits. And I think also the social benefits have materialized quite well as well, now that we have been able to cross-pollinate between the projects and get to know each other much better. So that's utilizing my academic background in orientation. But we're a bit behind schedule, so let's get to it. First, we will have a presentation by Peter Segedi, which gives the EOSC landscape through which this call was born, and gives, in a way, the political background for the existence of this project. And after that, Mark van den Sanden will come and talk about the technical landscape to try to show how the different core components that we will develop fit in this technical landscape. And then afterwards, I will give a little bit more detail on the different components that we try to develop in this project. And then last will be Ingrid Dillo, and she will talk about how the different projects can collaborate and the different EOSC entities can collaborate together in this interesting framework where we have many simultaneous projects working on slightly similar topics. So we need to be very careful to collaborate well with each other. For the live streaming, there's a Slido link in the slide on the bottom, and you may ask questions via that link, and they will be monitored and then brought up after each presentation. But with that being said, Peter, please, you're welcome. Yes, of course. I will start my very first slide, but it's all right.
This should be the one. All right, so thank you very much for having me, first of all. It's very good to see you, some familiar faces in the crowd. So it's first of all, it's my congratulations to all of you to get here and got funded. And of course, the bulk of the job is now ahead of you. So you have to deliver, so I wish you all the best for that. So my name is Peter Sagadi. I work for the European Commission DG-CNECT Unit C1, which is Open Science and Digital Modeling. We traditionally found the e-infrastructures, the complete storage network, EGI and the likes, some of the research infrastructures, but the recent restructuring, we are looking more into some open science initiatives and also digital modeling as part of the Destination Earth program, if you heard about it. By the way, if you have any questions or interest in any of the topics that I'm talking about, please interrupt me. I'm happy to respond. Anyway, I keep talking. So, also for your information, so the Commission tend to delegate these days the budget implementations to agencies. So I think your project officer is not from the Commission; he's from the Research Execution Agency, the agency REA. Right. So that is happening now with the Commission. We tend to delegate those stuff to agencies. We really keep the key flagship projects for ourselves, and of course the entire program management around it. So far we have EOSC Future, which is our flagship project in the EOSC destination, GÉANT, and a couple of others in-house, I mean, managed by the Commission. All the others are already in REA. And this is more so for the New Horizon Europe program. So I think all the projects which we have in the destination now is managed by REA, which means that we of course have a close cooperation with them because they are actually implementing and we will be responsible for the program. So about EOSC, so how the Commission sees EOSC as one of our flagship destinations, right? It's definitely a process. And you are part of this process now. It's a change. We're making a big shift, and that cannot be done from one day to another, and definitely cannot be done in one step. So it needs multiple steps. So we understand this, right? And we look into this as a process to mainstream open science, which is and all the principles, open science principles around them, which is definitely a key objective for your project and all the projects in this destination. We as DG-CNECT, we also look into EOSC as an infrastructure, so a federation of infrastructures, because we connect, we're responsible for infrastructures. I mentioned the infrastructures, other research infrastructures, networks, and other stuff. Note that the EOSC destination also co-managed by DG RTD, and those guys are responsible more for the policy side, right? So when it comes to the EOSC implementation in terms of policy, in terms of the organization, the EOSC association, the partnership board, the steering committees, and all kinds of things, that's all on the RTD side. When it comes down to services and infrastructure, and mostly the things that you guys will be working on, that's the DG-CNECT side. So definitely from our point of view, this is the view to have an open and trusted federation of infrastructure. And of course, the whole ecosystem, right? So the third aspect is that we understand how federated architecture works. It needs an evolving ecosystem around it to make it alive. That includes sustainability models, and I'm very pleased that in the introduction I heard that. That should have been one of my advice to you for further on, that think about sustainability of the services that you develop from day one. It should not be an afterthought. It's often a mistake that projects develop something and hoping that will be then picked up by someone at some place and then it slowly fades away. It should not happen to your results. And I think we do have all the mechanisms around it to help you with that. All right, so as I mentioned, you're part of the Horizon Europe program as one of the first funding cycles in that new 7-year program. And in fact, open science is a recurring topic around the entire Horizon Europe program, if you read through it, which is definitely a good move towards mainstreaming some of the aspects of open science that we want to bring in here. Also, in the context of the European research area, EOSC is recognized as one of the key roadmap actions. In fact, it's certainly that's a little bit of old slide. If you go onto the New Era website, you'll find the latest version of their roadmap, where EOS even got higher in their priority list, which is definitely a step ahead. So they definitely recognize European Open Science Cloud as a flagship activity, helping the European research area and the common market to develop in this specific segment. You should also take into account the relations to the European strategy for data. Part of it is implemented via another program called the Digital Europe program, or DAP, which runs in parallel with Horizon Europe. In the DAP program, we look after data spaces, mostly industry-specific data spaces, right? And if I think I have a slide about it here. This is just an attempt to try and sort of position these industry data spaces against EOS. What you can imagine is that EOS, being a data space for research and innovation, it has tight links and sort of overlaps with all the other industry data spaces with their researchy edge, right? Because all of those, if you think health or agriculture, food, all of those industry type of data spaces do research, right? There's more like industry type research rather than academic research, but definitely they produce data. The data is capitalized in those spaces. So definitely EOS has a role for sort of touching into all of those data spaces. So in that sense, it's a somewhat special data space if you try and incorporate the EOS approach into the data spaces concept of the DAP program. Therefore, we of course work together with those guys who are managing the DAP program, especially the smart middleware area part of it, which should create some kind of core functions and components for all the data spaces to share, which is very much or should be in line with the EOS-Core that we are specifically developing, or the community is developing for the EOS as a data space. And of course, the open science policy, right? So I mentioned that throughout the Horizon Europe program, open science is a recurring topic, and indeed in the open science policy itself, EOS appears as one of the target objectives there. So it sort of ties together all of these initiatives across the community to make sure that it's progressing. We also have a new approach in the Horizon Europe program, which is about European partnerships. This part, as I said, mostly managed by my colleagues in the GRTD, but that's an important note for yourself to see how the actual implementation on the policy side is happening with EOS. So we already stepped into this phase 2, as we call it, phase 2, where we have the association inaugurated, they're operational, they're hiring people. I recently talked to them. They have a CTO and other program and policy officers, or project officers, maybe they call them. So that's it's a growing organization to help the community to join their membership and coordinate together the actions. And we as the Commission stepped into a co-program partnership with the association, and we have then a tripartite governance. So the three, maybe to this slide as well. So you're obviously familiar with the SRIA, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, and that's the one that the association is nurturing and then looks after by all of their task forces. So that's definitely again, a recommendation for yourself to keep a close relationship to those task forces where the underlying development happens, and of course it gets aggregated and consolidated at the association level, and they maintain the SRIA. The new version will come soon, and we also have what we call the multi-annual roadmap, or MAR, which is a 2-year roadmap for the SRIA, right? So the SRIA sets out the strategies and the vision for a longer term, and every second year the association produces the MAR, the multi-annual roadmap, which actually takes into account your developments, for instance, right? So all the things that you can read in the new version of the MAR, the roadmap, those are the things that you guys learn from the SRIA as gaps in the implementation. You are now proposing to implement it, and your implementation should be reflected in the multi-annual roadmap to be able to help the association and the whole EOSC ecosystem to develop their next vision, the new vision. So this is how it's supposed to work. And the tripartite governance. The important element there is that we do have the member states there, right? So I already mentioned the association and the members, the association members, and I hope your home organizations are all members of the EOSC association. So that's the actual organization under Belgian law, and the commission up there is in a partnership with the association plus the member states. So the member states and the member state representatives are the third party to this whole ecosystem, and that's very important. So another suggestion, if I may, is when you're developing your services and you think about sustainability from day one, you should also think about what value you're bringing to the member states and to their key institutions, right? So the member states often represented by one of the delegated institutions in towards the commission, right? When we set out our policy. And so I think it's very important to demonstrate the value to the member states and to those key institutions, right? Because they're supposed to maintain and sustain these services if they're successful to the entire federated ecosystem, right? There is an arrow here pointing to the commission, which is about the procurement. I'm not allowed to talk about the procurement, although I'm responsible for some part of it. But the idea there is that the commission will again step in and help procuring an operational core part of EOSC, which is at the moment being developed by EOSC Future. EOSC Future is a huge project, 40 million euros, and I don't know how many participants in there. Obviously, the Commission made the decision to try and consolidate all the tiny developments into one flagship project, which then will be responsible for putting out the EOSC-Core. This is now a second or a complementary attempt to try and also procure those services which are mature enough to be procured from the market to help the development of the EOSC-Core. I think what it means from your point of view is that your project is a 3-year project, right? So this change from EOSC Future and whatever EOSC Future achieves, and this kind of hand over to the contracted parties who will then be procured by the Commission and run the EOSC-Core, that change will happen somewhere halfway in your project lifetime, right? So this is something that you have it's definitely a challenge, right? I must admit, but you have to take that into account, right? So when you're developing your services, you should be modular enough and agile enough to see, how those services can, link to or fit into an EOSC-Core, which might be different from the EOSC-Core as we know today. Okay, but this is roughly a challenge for all of these projects in the destination, because the whole EOSC concept moves such a speed, thanks partly to you and to your community, of course, that's very difficult to adopt all these changes at once. But it's definitely something that you have to think about. Yeah, maybe I wanted to say it here, but this looks like a very high level over a roadmap from the SRI, actually, where you see the years you're covering now, 22, half of 22, right, 23 and 24. So this is the part where the core is supposed to grow, right? So the core will be there, as I said, partly facilitated by the procurement, will be there as a stable element, hopefully, let's say towards the end of 23, let's say, yeah, early 24 maybe. And that's the part where from that point on, it's supposed to grow, and your services, it's all proposed to be part of the core, supposed to grow this, right? And the grow can mean different things, right? Grow in terms of coverage, grow in terms of, you know, what data sets or what elements are available in EOSC, grow in terms of making the fairness level of the certain research disciplines higher. So, and I do believe that all the services that you proposed points into that direction. Quite challenging though, I must say, just reading through the number of services that you propose to be delivered. I understand they are not coming from zero. You're taking some previous developments into account, which is definitely a good thing, but still, you have to make sure that those, at least some of those services to develop will stick in a way that, you know, it can be a longer term picked up and be really an integrated part of the core services. So again, this is just a very high level overview of the project under the EOS destination. We came from quite far through the Horizon 2020, and now we're stepping into Horizon Europe. And maybe this one shows, so these are the new bunch of projects which are starting under the Horizon Europe program, right? Some of the previous Horizon 2020 actions are still moving over and overlapping, especially the EOS Future one, that's the specific one that points to the procurement action. I put a URL at the bottom of the page, so if you want to read more about the objectives of the procurement action and where we're standing. We already had 2 webinars, open webinars, about you know, collecting some input or feedback to the procurement. It is still open. There is a functional mailbox where we still receive inputs or, you know, any feedback or comments with regard to the procurement. So feel free to email the commission that way. So that's it. That's definitely the challenge, right? So this it shows, you know, this change will come somewhere halfway of the life of all these other projects, plus the new ones starting every year, right? So we have the work program for 22 and also for 24, which will be, I think, accepted towards the end of the year. So you will see what goes into the new work program 24 soon. So those projects will sort of gradually popping up, right? So you're definitely early and in the right stage of this change, which will happen in the next coming years. So in your funding cycle, we had like roughly 60 million euro to spend. By the way, in the EOSC destination, in the 7-year program, the Commission committed 500 million euro, and also the member states committed another 500 million euro to match up the investments. It's altogether a 1 billion euro program or investment. Via the association, we also monitor all the activities that the member states are supposed to contribute, most likely in-kind contributions, could also be thinking about some in-cash contributions as well in the future. So that's the whole destination, which this part of it was like 60 million. 6 topics we identified in here. So you are in deploying the core components of FAIR. So that's you. You said you already talked to the FAIR impact people. I think EOSC Focus is kicking off today in Vienna, if I'm not mistaken. So those guys, that's for the support for the association and their task forces, right? Primarily skills, more on the training side. And a bunch of smaller projects actually in the innovative services area, which is supposed to contribute to the exchange part of EOS, right? So to my understanding, but here you can correct me, feel free, is that whenever you think about the EOS core services, that a little bit of a different business model or funding scheme around it, and it's being discussed by the Financial Sustainability Task Force. So I highly recommend for yourself to participate in those conversations. They're thinking about the core services more like kind of like a subscription type of model where membership type of model where everybody chips in a little bit. Also, the commission can top it up, of course, and then we maintain the core services. While around the exchange services, they're thinking about more like a cloud business models, pay as you go. You pay for the service that you get from the exchange, and but all the details around it needs to be worked out, right? My advice, as I said, always think about the benefits that you can bring to the member states and to the key institutions. That's what matters, right? All the clusters and the cluster of clusters and the cluster of clusters and everything that the Commission likes to put in place. There's a very good things to discuss and to align strategies and organize for research disciplines and developments into certain manageable pieces. But what it boils down after all is that what the end users and what the key those big national research institutions and what the member states really want, and see how they benefit from it. All right, so I think this was our view when we developed the program, the description, and then this is what you responded to, right? So presumably you know this in and out. I'm not gonna go into the details of that, right? So I think reading your proposal through, I think you addressed, I would say, almost all the elements or aspects that we put into this into the proposal as the next generation or the value added components to the core. I think they're very well positioned. My take is that a bit too ambitious, but it's all up to you to deliver, of course. But definitely, I mean, it's all on the spot. So I think that's very good. And I think this one maybe just I'm not sure what Mark was talking about, but this is something that leads to that overall concept of the core and the exchange services. I think you're familiar with this architecture, like it or not. This is something that EOSC Future and previously, I think even in the task forces of the association came up with, that basically describes a core, the coordination technical functions, and the exchange part with some horizontal and domain specific services on top. And what is happening in EOSC Future is that all the cluster projects and the e-infrastructures and all those services from the different disciplines are gradually moving up and mapping up to this architecture. Of course, as I said, some parts of it will be procured and make it more operational or sustainable, if you wish, that way. Definitely we're thinking about longer term in that aspect, but nevertheless, all these useful services should gradually step up. And if they can utilize or they can be more incentivized by the services that you guys develop, that's definitely the objective here, right? So if those elements, those nine services you propose, those sort of like pointing to the direction that these specific research clusters via the use cases that you propose, or other research disciplines can sort of see a real benefit for them to join EOSC. That would be a huge step ahead, because I think around the value proposition and around the real benefits of this whole thing, we are a little bit struggling to make that point. So most of these clusters at the moment are joining EOSC by commitment, right? We tell them to do so, and they're doing it, right? But it should be a mindset change, right? This should be something that I'm joining it because I see good examples and I see my benefits, and I'm joining it. So I also want to benefit, and maybe I give my services or solutions to others to benefit from it, right? So that step still needs to be made, and it cannot be done in one step, of course. So that's my advice or my take on your activities. And with that, I thank you very much for listening to me. And if you have any questions,
Thank you for the presentation. I'll clarify a number of pieces that stood out. But I wonder if you might elaborate on your comments about being over ambitious. Are you talking about this project or more broadly?
Yeah, both. So, of course, I cannot compare your project to EOSC Future, right? So, as I said, EOSC Future is our big flagship project now that is managed by the Commission directly, right? We recently attended the first year review, where my conclusion was that we do understand the challenges bringing and consolidating all those big partners and the efforts into one project. It's not something that quickly happens, but still the challenging part of it is that, you know, how broad your vision is and how much you try and squeeze into one project. And that's a little bit reading through your proposal, which I understand just a short version of all the documents and the study that you've done so far. A little bit I had the feeling here as well that, you know, those 9 services, again, they well respond to the core. I understand that, but still, how many of them will reach the point that will actually really demonstrate value more than what it is for their specific communities? That's the key, right? Because that corresponds to the TRL levels that you want to implement. So if those use cases remain in their very specific domain, that's not the level of TRL that you might want to go up if you want to make them part of the core, right? Because then you want to step up where it's demonstrate the useful for the entire EOSC ecosystem and not just that particular use case or domain where you are developing it. And that's a very difficult step to do, even for EOSC Future, who should really put the basics in place, I would say, right, for the core, via the demonstrators that they showed the Commission through the review and they still very much domain and use case specific. And it's very difficult to make that step, and you have to think about it from day one, how you make that step. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Sanden. I'm a technical specialist at SURF. I'm also the technical coordinator in EUDAP. And I'm also involved in EOSC Future, and I'm also the chair of the technical steering group within FAIRCORE4EOSC. Okay. In this, and Zoom, a little bit up. The Zoom stop. This. Click on it. Thanks. You already had the whole story from Peter about what the EOSC is, what the EOSC vision is, but I want to describe it a little bit different, more from a technical point of view. If you look at the diagram has been developed by the previous sustainability working group in describing of how does EOSC look like from a very high level of an architecture. And they had identified the EOSC-Core, and what they see as part of the EOSC-Core is really, as what Peter said, is the basics. And frequently I make a comparison with the EOSC, as for example, if you see EOSC as a shop, what are then the basis of a shop? And then, for example, you need a building because people have to go to somewhere. You need registries. So if people want to allocate some resources, they have to go to, okay, how do I get those resources? Or maybe how do I pay for the resources? But also you need shelves where you put all the stuff, the goods which you have within the shop to present this to the users. But you also need agreements with providers who are making their services available, the resources, the goods available through the shop. So really the EOS-Core are the fundamental basics of making EOS run. If you then go to the federated data layer, it is, and that is, I think, one of the main focuses. How do you want to make data available? And that is always in the vision of EOS, the web of fair data and services. So you need to make the data available, but you also need services so that you can work with the data, so that you can produce resource output on this. And then if you look at the exchange, those are is in principle the goods which are made available through the shop. What are the services? What are how can you make use of the data available, made available through EOS? And that was the initial diagram, but the diagram has already been extended somewhat more, because if you look at the parts which go from the core to the end of the exchange, you see that different kinds of resources are made available. Not just services, but that was the initial step where we started from. How do you want to make services available? But we are extending this to other kinds of resources, other kinds of resource products. And this, I think, is certainly a big step for us to be able to achieve the web of fair data. Also, you see the circle, which is the interoperability framework. And I think that is a very important aspect. Because if you look at EOS, it is to how do you connect data with services, but also how do you want to connect data from other communities to services from other users or other communities. And therefore you need the EOS interoperability framework. How do you connect, and via which guidelines and standards, how do you want to promote this, that you can make those connections. And I think that is part of the very important aspect. So what we are purchasing the web of fair data and services, but also do not start from scratch, because already a lot of infrastructure is already available. We have the RIs, we have the e-infrastructure, and it's about connecting those, federating those services which are already available.
Can I ask you a quick question just at this point? Do you mind?
Yeah, no problem.
Just wanted to double check so that I understand it clearly. You know, there's obviously the core EOSC services, and there's the procurement piece of that. And then there's international infrastructure, there's national infrastructure. And so is it clear that this is all about federation? And so we're not going to have a one infrastructure that captures all, but federating this all in. Obviously, the goal is the core EOSC infrastructure services, but there will be federation and
yes. Okay. It's mainly about the federation, and also if you look at, for example, how the RIs are doing this, is about connecting their own platforms, their own infrastructure. How do you want to make use of the EOS-Core capabilities, but also how do they want to make their data available through EOS, or their services made available through EOS. So it is not that we want to replace anything, but it's more about the integration, how to connect the different services and resources made available. As already also said, I think one of the main directions for driving the development of EOS is, of course, the SRIA, that's already described by Peter, but also the EOS Association task force. There are in total 13 task forces developed, working at the moment on different areas. And many people are already participating in a broad sense from all the members of the EOS Association, working towards different topics to come to see, okay, how should we evolve EOS in the future, but also making those plans available through the update of the SRIA, or as was described in the MAR. And the next thing is also the EOS Focus project, which also just started this month, will develop further also in EOS. And I think one of the main aspects, I think, for EOS is that you want to make your services available across boundaries, because many of the organizations, many of the RIs have already done a lot of work, already have set up
all the platforms, all the integration, the interoperability within their own domain. How do you want to bridge across? I think that is the main aspect of EOS. How do you want to make the service and resources available across communities, across infrastructure, but also across national boundaries?
And it might also relate to the question about the federation, that
Yes.
we aim at the federation, but one of the obstacles to be overcome is to understand the policies inside the different members of the federation and how they can cooperate in this very various landscape. Who can use what and how?
And that's certainly one of the big barriers which we have is it's not only on the technical side, because many of the things, if you decide, okay, these are the standards which we use or the guidelines which we use to connect services, but under which conditions do you want to make those services available? And those are mostly already nationally defined or within communities defined. But if you want to have users from outside of your community accessing your services, then there's another question, because under which conditions will that be the same from the community or from the national policies, or maybe there are other policies defined. And what we currently see mostly of those policies is that they are really fixed around national boundaries. Because, for example, the services within the Netherlands which we provide and serve, we can serve to the Dutch users, researchers, easy, because we have the ways. If you are coming from outside and you have less or no connection with the Netherlands, then it's another different game. So we do not know on which policies, on which guidelines can you get access to the service and on which conditions. And I think that is one of the main parts which we try to solve within EOS, to broaden up the landscape so that it is much more easier to share resources across communities and across the boundaries. If you look at the mission of EOS Future is that we are working on developing the minimal viable EOS. And if you look at what is the minimal viable EOS is, we are developing the EOS core components, and I will show a diagram where we have a broader overview of what the components are. Also, we are calculating the EOSC exchange. That is done via the portal and the marketplace. We are establishing an interoperability framework. I will go also in more detail on the interoperability framework itself, but also we are supporting. So we are also supporting the communities to see how can you connect to the EOS, on which basis, for which services, how do you want to make your data available? And I think that is also a very important aspect of what we work. We work closely with the cluster communities, because we have 5 cluster communities, part of the EOS Future projects. We have defined in total 10 different science projects, which are really connecting different communities, different RIs from the different domains to each other to see how can we make use of the data from one community to the other community, but also how do we want to make the data, for example, available for EOS. How do you want to, from a service provider point of view, connect to EOS? And this is an animated diagram where you can go through the different steps of how you want to connect. For example, if you just are a service provider and you want to make a service available to EOS, first step what you can do is onboard the service into the service catalog. That means you have to describe the service, you have to go through the onboarding process, and then the service, if everything is accepted, is made available to EOS, and all the users, researchers can discover your service. If you are a data source provider, and the data source is a service where you collect a lot of data, which you make available to your users, then you can also make the data available through EOS. Next to onboarding the service itself, you can make your data source harvestable through EOS. Then also the content or the metadata of the content is eventually discoverable through EOS. And that is one of the major steps which we are working toward in the new release, to make also the data discoverable to EOS, because at the moment, focus was initially at making services discoverable. If your data source needs to log in, because users want to upload the data and make the data available through your data source, then you have an AI infrastructure, because people need to log in. If you want to allow EOS users to log in and to make it more easy, then you can connect your data source to an AI proxy, which is EOS AI Federation compliant. and your organization can join the EOSC AI Federation. And that means that via this way, users coming from other domains behind all kinds of AI proxies that are joined within the EOSC AI Federation can easily access your service, including all the data or the resources made available. If your data source collects a lot of usage metrics on the data, then you can also expose these metrics to EOS, so that you expose that these resources, these data is being used in this way in connection with all kinds of data. And this can be done via the accounting for products. And in this way, you can show, for example, what are the open science impact you have with the data which you store as the data source. On another aspect, for example, you can also have your service monitored by EOS, meaning that EOS is monitoring the availability of your service. It's not that we are monitoring everything on your service, more focusing on the availability, showing what kind of quality of service you have within your service. And that is more targeting towards users. So if the user is searching for different kinds of services, and they see services made available through different providers that are similar, they can select which kind of service they want to use, for example, on the basis of what kind of quality is provided, for example, what kind of monitoring information is being provided by the service. You can also connect your help desk, because if users are coming to EOS, then you can provide a single gateway within EOS through your help desk. So that makes it easier for users to connect to you if they have any questions on your service or they have any problems with your service. Then there is a single help desk, a single channel through EOS, but you will provide it via the connection of your own help desk so that you can support the users of EOS, of the users coming through EOS. Depends on how the service is being offered. We have services which are free at the point of use. You can go to the service, log in, create an account, and log in. But some services, certainly are services which require more amount of resources made available. Those services need mostly be requested. So EOS is also providing a channel for ordering. So if you go to the marketplace, you can order a service, you fill in the information which you want, the amount of resources which you want. Then if you connect your service delivery process to EOS, then it is also, again, an easy channel for the users and the service providers to connect to each other to provide those resources made available. Then the last component, and that is more looking at what, for example, for providers who are also participating in virtual access, so that they provide resources to users free at point of use, but are reimbursed by EC for the usage. Then if they want to publish their usage metrics, collect this information more in a central place, then also the reporting about virtual access and usage of the service is made easier. So therefore, we also can provide accounting for services. These services are not only on paper or in nice diagrams. We have these services also in practice. And we are very much developing those services within the future. If you look at the EOSC Federation, at the moment we are already working with different AI proxy providers so that they are compliant, become compliant to the EOSC Federation. That is not only on the technical side, but also on the policy side. And the EOSC AI Federation will be made available at 2022, in October 2022, so that you can join the federation, and then you can allow more easy access on the basis of AI. We also provide services already for monitoring, but we are improving those so that we can more flexible monitor different kinds of services, different kinds of metrics can be monitored through the system. We have also the accounting model for services already also available at the moment, more at the demo stage, that will be made available in beta version. And also, if you look at, for example, those 7 projects are more looking towards these kinds of services so that they can publish their usage metrics. The research products statistic is already a service available in open air, but we are moving toward that these can also be made available at the EOSC level. It has to do also that we want to make research projects available. Therefore, when that will be made available, and that will be in month 18, and also this kind of accounting will be made available. We also provide an operation portal, and the operation portal is for service providers, for example, how to manage the requests coming in from EOSC, and also the service delivery of those requests towards the users. And EOSC also already provided a help desk, so that they already provided a channel for support in EOSC itself, but providers can connect the help desk to the EOSC help desk, so that we more have a single channel of providing support to the users. I will go a little bit more in detail in the resource product catalog, because I think if you look at FAIR, certainly if you look at the steps we are making in the resource product catalog to make more data available, I think also more of the FAIR aspects are becoming more important. This is a screenshot of the current EOSC marketplace, and at the moment, the services made available are services, so we cannot make data at the moment available. We can upload or onboard services which contain data, but not yet the data itself, but we are working very much towards this. At the moment, we have about 300 plus onboarded services, also from more than 200 different service providers. And if you look at the statistics, on a monthly basis, we have about 40,500 different unique users in a month going to the exchange, looking for services, and making access to and requesting those services. What kind of providers do we have? It is a very wide range of providers. The EFOS have onboarded their services. Many of the RIs have onboarded certain kinds of services, but certainly not all services, they provide a certain kind of services. But I think for the RIs also more is towards can you make the data available? So that will be one of the big steps made available. But also we have many services for many different institutes, which are not directly affiliated within the community, but just as an institute want to make the service available into EOSC. As said, at the moment, the initial focus was okay for services, different kinds of services, as was depicted by the picture of Peter. We have horizontal services which are generic, targeting many more communities in a generic way, but also we have different thematic providers providing their services. The big step is that we are extending this with resource products. So making research products available. You cannot upload your data set automatically and directly into EOSC. You will do this via all kinds of services, and those are data sources or software registries or journals. That is no problem. But the main step what we are doing is that we want to make the content, metadata of the content, discoverable for EOSC, so that you really can search for content. If you look at the types of services, we have different categories so that you easily get filtered through the services, but also there we want to make major advancements to improve the searchability and filtering of services. And also, if you look at products, we are more finding this in data set software and publication. But I think what the most important aspect is that you can integrate all these kind of sources. For example, if you have this digital publication on the Twitter data made available, but you can also link this automatically to the data itself. And when you have the data, you want to analyze the data, you also need software. So you can also link this to the software which is used to analyze the data. And of course, you need a service where you make all this kind of information available. And I think by having all these services available, but also that you can make discoverable, all this information discoverable and interlink this information, then you can see and have an overview of the whole research assets done for example, this project. As said, we are moving towards a new marketplace where we not only focus on service, but also making data available. In the marketplace, we are also looking at, okay, who are you? Not just from the user making use of the marketplace, but also if you are a provider, then we have different portals to make the services available. And if you look on the right side, there, that is a view of how it could look like. There you see the different categories of products that is available where you can search, get search through. At the moment, it's not yet available. It will become available in September 2022. One of the new capabilities which are using is that we have been working very much with the research to optimize how do you want to make use of the marketplace, how do you want to find information, and have a long process to get to this, that we are developing different kinds of user paths to see, okay, how can we optimize the searching, but also we are improving the search capabilities with artificial intelligence, so that if you search for something, then you can better filter, better choose the information which you are searching for in the marketplace. Because that was one of the things which we got a feedback is, I can search, but I get that a lot of information. How can I filter for this information? What is important to me? Therefore, I'm more adapting to find more choose, more availability to optimize the searching capability. Another aspect, I think, is also the EOSC interoperability framework, because that is really about defining how do you connect data with services and across. So, if you look at the current state, is that there are many already infrastructures available. How do you want to connect across the different infrastructures? And I think if we want to define this, it is also what kind of standards and guidelines we want to promote for EOS that should support the interoperability. It does not come automatically by itself because we have used the interoperability framework, but it is more that which standards do you want to promote? Because we have many standards, maybe too many. So we want to narrow down the choices that, okay, these are the standards we want to promote. And if you adapt to those, then it will support better interoperability across the different providers. And for this, it's more that we are targeting at the provider itself, because somewhere the standards should be taken up. This is done by the provider or by the technology provider, which is implemented the standard. This is just a diagram to show, okay, how the current landscape looks like, because every community, for example, has already defined the standards, their own interoperability framework. But if you look at EOS, it is how to bridge. So therefore, you have to see, okay, which standards, which guidelines do you want to use, which capabilities to bridge. And that will then be the focus. And I really will mention that it is about promoting. It is not that we are developing those standards by itself. We will develop the standards for the EOSC-Core, how to connect to the EOSC-Core, but how do you want to connect services across? These have to come by the community. You have to find consensus on which guidelines and standards you want to connect, for example, in computing and the data store, or how do you want to support other kinds of capabilities. And they have to come from the community themselves by finding consensus, by also defining what kind of update is needed for those standards. This is a diagram where we depict different kinds of interoperabilities. From our point of view for the EOSC-Core, we are more looking towards the interoperability at what we describe as interoperability A, because that is interconnected with the EOSC-Core capabilities. But also you have more generic interoperability, for example, between community services and horizontal services. But also, for example, if you have different communities who want to exchange information or connect different kinds of services within the community or across the community. One of the examples is what we are working on is, for example, is on the data transfer service, because that is one of the services which have been discussed a large number of times within EOS Future. That this is one of the services many of the communities are looking at. This service where we are talking about is, for example, very highly used within the WLCD community. They transfer petabytes, exabytes of data with the service. But how do you want to adapt this that other communities can use the same kind of service? Therefore, we are developing also the guidelines. Okay, how can you make use of this rule? Via which standard can you transfer data? But what we also want to do is that this kind of information, the services onboarded in the catalog, but there's all kinds of services. We're also describing that these services are compatible, for example, with the data transfer service, because they support the same APIs, which can be used to move data from A to B. And because you can search services on basis of those tags being provided, standards and guidelines being provided in the descriptions of the services, then you can also search for those, also select services which are compatible, for example, with the data transfer service, because we are more compatible to each other. If you select a service which is not compatible, then you are more bound to your own to see, okay, how can I move my data from one source to, for example, the computing facility? Because they are not supported. If you select services which support the same standard, then it's more easy because then you can use the data transfer service. That is how we are looking at how to work with it. And this all the information should then be made available to the catalog that you can select services on basis of this type of information. We have been talking already a long time of the EOSC interoperability framework, but it is always very vague. What does it mean? What it is? And within EOSC Future, we are more establishing what the EOSC interoperability framework is, but also you need to populate the interoperability framework. So no standards are coming by itself into the EOSC interoperability framework. And therefore, we are setting also a governance body to have a procedure so that you can submit, because these are the guidelines we want to promote within EOSC. But we have all kinds of bodies to assess, okay, is this a standard which should be part of the EOSC interoperability framework? And within this process, we can manage, okay, what kind of requests do we get in? What kind of guidelines are being provided for which kind of capabilities? What is the quality of the guidelines being provided? And then access what that these should be included within the EOSC interoperability framework, because these are in scope of EOSC itself. Many communities, for example, already have their standards available. We're also looking into see, okay, can we not have something special for communities that communities can promote their standards because they are more community specific. That is a separate track which we are looking also into next to more generic one, which is more described in this way. But if you have those standards made available and the initial scope, because in previous projects they already had been work to establish certain kinds of standards, mostly looking at okay, the standard for the EOSC-Core, that will be our starting point. But the objective is that we want to be open, inclusive, that everyone can in principle develop standards. And I think if you look at FAIRCORE for EO and also FAIR Impact, they are developing many more guidelines for FAIR aspects or for the FAIRCORE components. Look at developing those standards, that those guidelines to make use of those services are included within the EOSC interoperability framework, so that you can populate the EOSC interoperability framework and promote those standards for those kinds of capabilities that should make available. For this, we are setting up also a registry, because we need to go what are the standard guidelines being promoted. So that will be part of the registry, so that you can onboard those standards when you go through the process, are accepted, then they are made available to the registry. I think this is the last slide. I want to thank all the people who are contributed to those slides, because the slides were also presented at Provider Day. I put in the link to watch the Provider Day. If you want to have much more details of all of the targets and all the components, then go and go to this website and all the slides, all the sessions are made available. Thank you.
Sorry, I have one question from the organizational stuff. Are these slides already available somewhere?
This person, these slides that were just presented.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm collecting
In the
them
wiki.
in the wiki. Yeah, there's a small table. So.
And then they will be available as a note or something.
Right, and a reminder that the questions you can put them in the Slido, and that's the mechanism to raise them here. All right, we're running a bit behind schedule, so I will try to be a bit brief. Skip a few slides maybe, but let's get started. So something on the content of the project itself. The project is 10 million, goes for 3 years, started this month. It has 22 partners from 7 different member states, including an international European research organization from Switzerland, that means CERN, and ARDC from Australia. We will collaborate intensively with the association task forces, EOSC Future, and FAIR Impact especially, of which there will be a presentation just after mine. We have 7 work packages. You can see the coordinating organizations and people there on the table. It's roughly, I think it was 1,086 person months in total, so it is a significant effort indeed. This we have pretty much covered in the first presentation, but in the Syria, gaps were identified in the state of the art. And the priorities highlighted in this area was the establishment of a web of fair data and a minimum viable EOSC. So that is essentially the smallest EOSC that is operable by 2027. Now, the gaps that were identified were related to identifiers, metadata and ontologies, interoperability, and research software. And now these gaps in the state of the art then pretty much got transferred as such to the call text, and we took them up very literally also then in the proposal and consequent project. These 9 core components that we have set out to develop are and that address these gaps is the EOSC Research Discovery Graph, which is built on top of the current efforts of OpenAIRE in trying to map the connections between different research products. This, in particular, in this product, this project focuses on the F of FAIR, the findability. So new ways of discovering data and new subgraphs of this data are being developed here. The second one is more on the FREIA legacy, the data side fit graph, in which we look at the graph itself very much and how the fits can be used to develop these networks of interconnected research objects. Now, the metadata schema and crosswalk registry is something that we are building from scratch. This doesn't exist, and this is quite an interesting component that we set out to develop. This is a place where you can deposit the metadata schemas from various disciplines. We try to, for each discipline, identify a core schema, such as the code meta for source code or the SERI for research information. And we try to map the other schemas to this central schema. And what that enables us then in the long run to do when we create crosswalks from the central standard to the other schemas, it actually makes it possible then to create a converter, which enables you to convert metadata from schema to schema via the crosswalk to the central schemas. And then we will develop the data type registry. There is some existing work to build on here. But then if we look at the schema and the elements of a schema, this goes then to the data types of the schema and potentially provides capacity to convert from data type to data type the concrete content. Now, the PID meta resolver is essentially a single point of access where you can resolve any PID. And so this will incorporate different PID types. And then the EOSC PID policy compliance assessment toolkit is something that first develops criteria that services can be evaluated against, and then tries to operationalize this as a toolkit that will enable evaluating whether services are EOSC PID policy compliant and to what degree. Now, in Mark's previous slides, he talked about services and data and marketplace and catalog. Now, the RAID steps in here when a user with an ORCID wants to apply to use a service, put in some data. All the PIDs together come into a kind of a metadata envelope. And when access is granted, this becomes a rated entity. So a research activity of sorts, which ties together the different PIDs of the organizations, the services, the data sets, and it becomes a kind of a wrapper for different PIDs that are connected in the context of a specific research activity. Now then, INEA works on the research software APIs and connectors. So this is how software heritage can pull in source code from various different types of repositories in order to build this critical mass of source code that becomes now with our efforts a new research object type in the PID graphs. And finally, we will set up a software heritage mirror so that that is hosted by EOSC, and that enables us to support the software heritage mission of compiling the world's research source code. Those are the technical components we develop. But then we have to show that they actually work. And our case studies, of which we have 5, are the way that we plan to show that the components that we develop not only work as themselves, but also with each other. So all of the case studies actually incorporate demonstrating how the many different components work together, which each case study having defined in the proposal which of the components they were planning to demonstrate. In the work packages themselves, there are also so-called demonstrators, which will then showcase a single component and how that works in a specific context. But that work is carried within the work packages, while this is a work package 7 activity. This is our project structure. So work package 1 is the coordination, strategic alignment. And on the bottom, we have the case studies, dissemination, outreach, and the communication type activities. In the middle, we have the 5 concrete development work packages that carry out the development of these core components. I'll go through this a bit quicker, but we have the work package 1, tasks. And for the 1.3, for this, I can say that this is a bit more the political or the organizational dimension of collaboration in the EOSC sphere, while then the 1.2 is the technical collaboration and coordination. For work package 7, I'll highlight here the 7.4. So this is related to the sustainability, which Peter mentioned. So we need to try to find out from the beginning how to sustain the core components that we develop. Work package 2 first develops indeed the framework for evaluating PID policy compliance, and then consequently the toolkit that implements that specification. and is then validated in the case studies. For work package 3, this highlights a typical structure that we have. We have usually the first task, which is working on the specifications. We have a milestone at month 8, where we, throughout the projects, try to have the first iteration of the specifications complete. But the specifications are not like a one shot, but they are iteratively improved and evaluated whether the first ones are valid. And then, as the last task in many of these work packages, we have the work package specific demonstrators. And here, as I already slightly mentioned, we have the research discovery graph based on the open air work. And then for the findability, they will develop different discovery mechanisms, such as natural language search, for trying to find suitable research objects that are relevant to a specific need. They will then also develop the portal side, so the user interface and user experience development that enables you to use those developed technologies. Then the data side, EOSC PID graph service, which looks at the graph itself and their demonstrators. For work package 4, we have a similar structure. Requirements, then the metadata schema and crosswalk registry development, which I already mentioned, as I did also the data type registry and the RAID service, and then we have the demonstrators that show how these the developed services then work. And for the PID kernel data or the meta resolver, which are together, the PID kernel data is actually somewhere where we also have a strong collaboration point to the FAIR Impact project, because they, for example, look at sensitive data. And we might have to collaborate here to look at, does the sensitive data have actually requirements towards the PID kernel information profiles? So specific data types might require a little bit different types of kernel information for the PIDs. And the software heritage, indeed, as I mentioned, it develops different types of connectors to access source code from different types of resources, and then develops the metadata and the PIDs for the software or the source code. And then the mirror, which was already mentioned. Now, these core components that we develop feed into outcomes, and that is really the building of the minimum viable EOSC, because the EOSC-Core is missing components to really operationalize it. And we are making the concrete tools that actually make that happen. Yeah. Now, as the timelines, the way that we have structured this project is that we have now, it's quite important that we start working hard from the beginning, because we need to produce quite good specifications by month 8, which is January next year. There, the work packages need to work together, but we have to also work really intensively with our case studies, because the case studies are a source of specification for us. And it's quite important to have a strong interaction with the case studies who work on the concrete disciplinary issues, and to ask them if what we're proposing actually works for them, and they are a source of inspiration for our specifications. And there's a lot of expertise as well in these case studies, so we need to really make it count. Then already at month 18, so 10 months later, we need to have the first working implementation. And then 4 months later, this needs to be already integrated into the operational case studies. So then after month 22, we still have 12 months to finalize the implementation, 2 months before project closure, after which we'll have an intensive dissemination spurt. So that's pretty much our outline of the activities, and I will conclude here, so that we have still time for Ingrid to keep her time slot. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ingrid Dillo. I am the Deputy Director at DANS, which is a data service provider in the Netherlands. And I'm also, since the beginning of this month, the coordinator of the FAIR Impact Project, the sister project of your project. And since I am a local, the first thing that I want to do is, if this works, why wasn't it? I'm an Apple girl, so this one, yeah, is to welcome you to our beautiful Amsterdam, of course. Now, I see a lot of familiar faces in the room that were already there in the last days, but I also see new ones. So I do hope that you have some time to get a flavor of the city. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I want to give you a quick insight into FAIR Impact. FAIR Impact is a project that is very similar to yours in the sense that it has the same budget, 10 million euro. We have the same duration, 3 years. We start at the same point in time. But there are also differences, of course, and I will talk about that. As you can see on this slide, we have 28 partners in our consortium from 10 different EU member states. And we also managed, with a lot of issues and troubles, to get 4 UK partners into our project as well. And I'm not going to tell you the gruesome stories of how that came about, but we're very happy to have them. This project builds very much on earlier work that we have done in the FAIR project that ended in early spring. So we will build on that, but also on many other outputs. And the core focus for us in this project is expanding FAIR solutions in Europe, so for the EOSC. Here you see the core partners in our project, 6 of them, and all of these partners lead work packages, and you see familiar organizations here, I'm sure. CSC in RAE, which is a French National Research Institute in the area of food, agriculture and environment. We have the Digital Curation Center in the UK. We have DIKE from Denmark, the Danish Infrastructure Corporation, and of course, Trust IT. But we have many more in our consortium, and I think it is a very nice mixture of a diverse group. So we have research performing organizations, we have a couple of universities amongst in our group. We have data providers, a couple of repositories. We also have domain-specific organizations, different domain infrastructures, and that is new compared to FAIR. And we also have 2 international organizations, the Research Data Alliance and CoData. So I think that gives us a nice starting point and a nice mixture of knowledge base and expertise and connections. So the overall objective of FAIR Impact is, as you can see on this slide, to realize a FAIR EOSC by supporting the implementation of FAIR enabling practices. And now it becomes interesting, across scientific communities. So that is key. And I think also Peter alluded to that. It's relatively easy to come up with solutions within the domain, but making it cross-cutting is a different story. So that is one of the focuses we have in this project. Not only cutting across scientific communities, also cutting cutting across as far as possible research output. So we will not only look at data, there was a strong focus on data in FAIR, but we will now expand also to software and also to semantic artifacts. And again, that we will not only be doing at the European level, but I think much more important also if you look towards the sustainability of all of this, is that we try to pay a lot of attention to the national and even institutional levels, because that in the end is where everything needs to boil down to make it sustainable in the long term. I'm not going to dive into the how now, because then I might be a little bit repetitive and we want to go to coffee, I'm sure. So here you see the 7 work packages that we have, quite how do you say that, the ordinary ones. We have work package 1, the project management. We have a work package 7 focused on dissemination, exploitation and communication. And in between it becomes interesting. There you see a couple of pillars that we have that focus on the different technical components. So we have persistent identifiers, we have a work package focusing on semantic artifacts, and one focusing on metrics, certification, and guidelines. And then we have a cross-cutting work package, which is work package 2, engagement, adoption, and implementation. I'll say more about that. And we have work package 6, interoperability. And on the one hand, that is cross-cutting in the sense that interoperability has all to do with persistent identifiers, metadata, etc. But in that work package, we will not only look at the technical and semantical interoperability, we will also look at legal and organizational interoperability. And we already heard also, I think, from Mark, that legal aspect, that alignment of policies and the trouble we have when we move data from one domain to another, but also from one country to another, is something that we hope to address then. Expected outcomes, I'm not going to dive into that, but just to give you a snapshot, and you can look it up later on the slides, maybe if you're interested. We have 3 main expected outcomes. The first one being improved fairness of data and other research outputs by coordinating the implementation of frameworks and the alignment of fair data practices. So we are all about alignment, adoption, implementation, coordination. This outcome is really related to those more technical work packages as you see them here on the screen. A second outcome that we have is focused on the uptake and compliance with fair data principles. And there you see the national aspect coming as well. National, and I'm moving too much. I'm reading someone behind me. That was a wide uptake. So that's the national and the European research data, metadata providers and repositories. So that's also important to say, a focus on that layer of service providers, of course, as enablers to serve the researchers in the end, because that is, of course, our end goal. So this work is, this outcome is mainly in the hands of our work packages 2 and 7 on engagement and adoption and dissemination and exploitation. And then the final outcome that we need to achieve, and I think that is one that comes back in all the projects, is the contribution to the Horizon Europe EOSC partnership. And that is, of course, something that should be woven through the whole project. And I think we have some instruments also in the project to make sure that that happens. But there is a big focus for work package 1 also there, also to make sure that we synchronize and align with everything that's happening in the project, but also outside of it. A little bit about the methodology that we developed for this project. So this project is really focused on adoption and implementation. And we are doing that in 4 tiers. And those tiers are really, I like to refer to them as ripples in a pond when you throw in a stone. So the first ripple goes deep and is impactful, but doesn't go wide. That first tier is the tier of our integrated use cases. So we have domain partners in our project. And together with them, we are going to look first of all, at things that they have on the shelf available in their domain, be it policies, practices, tools, frameworks, etc., that we can easily translate, adapt and translate to other domains. But we will also, together with them, co-design and co-create tools, etc., to translate from one to the other. So that is the first ripple. We have around 1 million available for that work in the project with those integrated partners. Then we have the second and third tier. They go wider, but they are smaller. So they reach out to a wider audience, but the impact will be less deep in a way. So these are very much related to our second objective. So we have, on the one hand, a cascading grants that will be distributed in open calls for organizations that want to work with us to help increase the fairness of their services and data. And we have around 500 million euro available for those calls. And we will also provide from the project around the same amount of in-kind support, also worth around 500,000 euro. So we will have people, experts from the project supporting people in organizations to make their work more fair. And then the final ripple in the pond, tier 4, is the synchronization and alignment with everything that's happening outside of the project. So I'm not going to dive into this too much. And one of the elements will come back here. Maybe good to mention that we will continue the work that we have been doing in FAIR with our synchronization workshops. They were quite successful, where we brought together everybody who was working in the European projects, but also the people from the EOSC Association, even before it was called that. To check where we were against the Turning Fair into Reality report from 2018 and all of their recommendations, to see what everybody was contributing to the implementation of that. And we want to continue that work in this project. And I'll come back to the technical bridging team, because the most interesting question for you, of course, as an audience from the FAIRCORE4EOSC is how do we relate and how can we collaborate? Now, I think we need to realize that the two projects have two different instruments. So FAIRCORE4EOSC is a research and innovation action. So that means that you will be designing and building technical components for the EOSC-Core. That is quite something else that from what we will be doing in FAIR Impact, because FAIR Impact is a coordination and support action, which means that we have a focus on dissemination, awareness raising, coordinating, etc., etc. So these are quite different things which also translate in different proposals and activities. And I think we are also very complementary, because you are going to build things. We can help you with the definition of the requirements, also with the communities that we have in our project. And of course, we can play a role once you have your components in spreading the word, having them adopted and implemented. So I think in that sense, we are nicely complementary, and that should be a good starting point to work together, I think. Now, how can we align and work together? I think there is already a very firm basis in the fact that we have 6 partners that are that have resource in both projects, and you see them here on the screen. And DANS, CSC, and Trust IT on our side lead work packages, and also in your project they play a very important role. So in that sense, I think we have a lot of quite natural, hopefully cross-pollination. But we also devised some instruments that you see here. We had already in our proposal the instrument of the technical bridging team. Now, the technical bridging team will be a team that consists of the technical leads of your project, and from your side, that is going to be Mark van der Zanden. From our side, from FAIR Impact side, that is going to be Wim Hugo, who again is a work package lead in your project. And we will also invite the 2 technical leads from EOSC Future in that team, and the CTO of the EOSC Association. So in that sense, that we hope that we have the key technical leads together, and we hope to bring them together, let's say 4 or 6 times a year to check progress and to see whether we are aligned. And of course, you will have internally, I think, also a technical steering board that can feed Mark with everything that's happening to go to those meetings, and we will do the same from our side. So hopefully that instrument provides us a basis upon which we have the guarantee that we keep things together and move forward together. What we also have is already, I think, a very nice working relationship between the two executive committees, or how do you say that? No, the project coordination offices, PMO on your side, PCO on our side. So we already have, I think, since early spring or maybe even before, bi-weekly meetings. So in that sense, we keep really up to speed. And the fact that we're here together 4 days back to back already proves that we have found one another and that we will probably be keeping working together very nicely for 3 years. And we also hope to get regular communication meetings and also look how we can communicate together from the two projects. So there are many levels, I think, and aspects on which we can have collaborations also to amplify the impact that we achieve. So together we can do it, I think. And with that, I'd like to stop. And I hope that we can look forward to very much collaboration. Thank you.